Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Okay, so we are now coming to the kind of grand finale, if you like, of the gradual training. So the very last part here, and some of these things are obviously going to be very profound, but I have always found in my life it's nice to see the whole path laid out, even though it may seem far away, it may seem a bit, you're not really sure perhaps about some of these things. I always find it's nice to see the whole thing. That's what I always wanted to do. So I assume the same is true for other people as well. So at this point, the Eightfold Path has been practiced to the end, and now come the results of this Eightfold Path. And as I mentioned before, the first one of these is the recollection of past life. So this goes as follows. We're now on page 8, paragraph 23 here. Unfortunately, this is a contracted version. So not everything is in there, but I'm going to read from a version that is in full. So it's going to read slightly differently from what you have in front of you here. So when his mind is thus concentrated, purified, cleansed, unblemished, rid of defilement, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, he directs it to the knowledge of the recollection of past abodes. He recollects his manifold past abodes, that is, 1 birth, 2 births, 3 births, 4 births, 5 births, 10 births, 20 births, 30 births, 40 births, 50 births, 100 births, 1,000 births, 100,000 births, many eons of world dissolution, many eons of world evolution, many eons of world dissolution and world evolution. Thus, there I was so named of such a clan, with such an appearance, such was my food, such was my experience of pleasure and pain, such my lifespan. Passing away from there, I was reborn elsewhere, and there too I was so named of such a clan, with such an appearance, such was my food, such was my experience of pleasure and pain, such my lifespan. Passing away from there, I was reborn here. Thus he recollects his manifold past abodes with their aspects and details. So this then is the recollection of past lives. And the first thing to notice here, it starts off by saying that the mind has to be pure for this to be possible, right? The very first line there, it says, when the mind is thus concentrated, or when his concentrated mind is thus. So this refers back to what we have just been doing, right? The practice of the jhanas. And quite specifically, it refers to the 4th jhana, as we will see later on. But we have to be careful here, because this is also here a matter of interpretation. Are you doing this recollection while you're in jhana, or are you doing it afterwards? And the way it is phrased here, it's a bit ambiguous. But as far as I can tell from the Pali, the way the Pali is constructed, the actual meaning of this is more like when his mind has been thus concentrated. In other words, he has been through the process of attaining the jhanas, and now comes this recollection afterwards. So it has been thus concentrated. It doesn't mean that it actually is concentrated in that state which is happening now. And this is the grammatical construction of the Pali seems to make that out. I'm not going to go into the grammar of the Pali though at this here. So, when his mind has been thus concentrated, purified, right, cleansed, unblemished, rid of defilements, malleable, wieldy, steady. Steady is one of these words that occurs specifically in the 4th jhana formula, and that's how you know that this specifically relates to the 4th jhana. And the last one is even more explicit, attained to imperturbability. This is a term that is used for the 4th jhana specifically, and also for the immaterial attainments. So you know that this recollection of past life is done based on the fourth jhana, or at least best done on that basis. This interesting, this idea of attain to imperturbability. What does it mean? And I think it means it relates back to this idea of having abandoned pleasure and pain before. So you have no preferences anymore, right? There's no idea about pleasure being better than pain. All of that is seen as suffering. You have found something higher, which is pure equanimity. And of course, if you are going to investigate something painful and difficult, like remembering your past lives, or you might see a lot of trauma, a lot of difficulties in the past, it's very nice to be aloof from all that and just be stabilized in equanimity and not really be concerned about happiness and pain anymore. All that, in a sense, has already been abandoned, right? So that is why I think one reason why the fourth jhana is very powerful, because all the pleasure and pain is already behind you here. So then, having then attained this fourth jhana, then you direct the mind to the knowledge of recollection of past lives. And that's really all it says in the suttas. It doesn't say how you do it, you just direct it. And generally speaking, the mind is so powerful at this stage that all you have to do is just put your mind in that direction, think back into the past, and then the mind does exactly, like a well-trained dog or something, it just goes back into the past all by itself, and then you can actually bring these things up. So all you do is just directing it. There's no real effort required. And then you recall all these past lives, various. Actually, an interesting difference between the two translations here is that this translation I have here says past abodes. It doesn't actually say past lives. And there's a slight difference in emphasis. Past abodes is like as if you have lived in many different places, right? It's like each life is just like a house, so to speak. For that period, you live in that abode. And then you move back and you live in a different abode. It's like you are going from house to house, going from life to life. So it's not, so in one way of looking at the human personality, the stream of consciousness, is like a continuum of life that just goes along all the time. It's not really life to life. It's the same consciousness, the same life that just exists in different abodes. That is one way of regarding this travel, if you like, through samsara, just like you're moving house in this life, but a little bit more kind of disturbing moving of house than the ordinary one. So that is the abode. So then he remembers all these past abodes. And you can see here 1 birth, 2 births, 3 births, 4 births, etc., etc. 100,000 births. And all of this obviously depends on your power of your faculties, how good you are at these things. So even if you remember 1 birth, that's good. But you can go up and remember enormous numbers if you have a very powerful mind. And then it has this idea of many eons of world dissolution or world evolution. Many eons of world dissolution and evolution. And this is an interesting idea because the way it is translated here on your sheet, it has world expansion and world contraction. In this latest version from Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, it talks about world evolution and world dissolution instead. And the point is that we don't really know what the Pali means. It means something. I think the new translation is more correct because what we know, it means something to do with evolution. Something is moving, right? And then it is kind of devolving afterwards, evolving and devolving, or evolving and dissolving, if you like. It may be, it's quite possible that it actually matches up with modern ideas about how the universe expands and perhaps how the universe contracts again. World evolution and contraction, expansion and contraction, it may well do that. But it's very hard to match ideas that existed 2,500 years ago with any reliability to modern ideas. They're just too far apart. Maybe they match, maybe they don't. I wouldn't be surprised if they do, though, because obviously the Buddha had some very profound insight into these things. So, many eons of world dissolution, evolution. You're seeing how the whole universe unfolds, essentially, and how you are this little piece moving around in this evolving universe. And then, of course, the important point is that you don't just remember the past life as such, but you remember the particulars in that past life. Just like you have an identity in this life and you know everything about yourself, when you go into the past life, remembering it, they say that memory is as if you're there. It's not just a memory, it's actually you are moving your consciousness, your mind into that past life, and it's as if you are present there. But not only present, but you're present with a very powerful mind. So it's incredibly clear what is going on. So you see, it's like you re-experience this with a very powerful mind. And that is why you can know all these details. You know who you were, the name you had, the clan you had, your appearance, the things you were eating, your experiences. And then eventually you know your lifespan, you pass away, right? And then you see the process of passing away and re-arising. Then you go from there to a new place. And then you know exactly the same about this new place until you die. And then you know the same thing re-arising again until you reach the present life. And this is important because what you're seeing cause and effect, right? You're seeing how you go from one place to another one based on causality, based on all kind of things. It's not just a flash, you know, oh, I saw a picture of the past lives, so I've seen my past lives. That's not really how it works. That would just be called like a nimitta of the past life. You're seeing a whole process there. And that is why you can feel so confident that actually it is you. It's like a real memory of you moving on from life to life, all the way to the present time, to right here and now. Just like a memory of the present life, except that it extends further back and that it is much more clear than the present life. So this is how you know past lives, and that is why you can be so confident that you actually have remembered the past life. It's not just some fantasy or a delusion on your part. There's this causal sequence taking you through, just like there was a causal sequence in this life. Okay, so that is so you remember these things with this manifold aspects and details. So there is a nice simile as well for this. I thought I would try to find that simile for you. Shouldn't be too hard if I can make this modern technology work. So here we are. So this is the simile for remembering the past life. Just as a man might go from his own village to another village and then back again to his own village, he might think, I went from my own village to that other village, and there I stood in such a way. I sat in such a way, spoke in such a way, kept silent in such a way. And from that village I went to that other village, and there I stood in such a way, sat in such a way, spoke in such a way, kept silent in such a way. And from that village I came back again to my own village. So it's quite straightforward, isn't it? It's just like a memory in this life. You remember your acts, you retrace your steps, what you did. In exactly the same way, you retrace your steps into the past life. So very quite straightforward how that works, I think. Okay, so let's go back to the text again. So there you are. That is the recollection of past lives. And again, remember what we are doing here. The reason why we're doing this is to understand reality, right? And this recollection of past life, the Buddha often has what he says after the recollection of past life. He says, like it says here, ignorance is dispelled, true knowledge has arisen, darkness is dispelled, light has arisen, as happens when one dwells heedful, ardent, and resolute. In other words, you are seeing reality, you're seeing how the world actually works. It's like the light being turned on, right? You're waking up. This is actually what it's like. Of course, we don't normally know about past lives. Many people are very skeptical of such things. So when you see it, suddenly for yourself, reality becomes clear. In other suttas, as I explained the other day, it's like the simile is given of like breaking out of a shell. And there's 3 breakings out of the shell. It's like a chicken hatching out of the shell, right? Coming out of the egg. And the first hatching of the shell is when you see your past life. Suddenly you see the world. You have been enclosed in this narrow confined space, and it suddenly opens up and you see the reality. And of course that reality is quite disturbing when you see it properly. So this is the purpose of this. You're actually seeing the first noble truth. You're seeing suffering. And because you are starting to see the first noble truth in a very deep and profound way, this is then driving you towards awakening. This is what we're seeing here. Okay, so let us move on to the second breaking out of the shell, of the eggshell, and the bringing on the light, so to speak. So when his mind is thus concentrated, or rather when his mind has been thus concentrated, purified, cleansed, unblemished, rid of defilements, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, he directs it to the knowledge of the passing away and rebirth of beings. With a divine eye which is purified and surpasses the human, he sees beings passing away and being reborn, inferior and superior, beautiful and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate, and he understands how beings fare on in accordance with their karma thus. These beings who engaged in misconduct by body, speech and mind, who reviled the noble ones, held wrong view, and undertook karma based on wrong view, with the breakup of the body after death, have been reborn in the plane of misery, in a bad destination, in the lower world, in hell. But these beings who engaged in good bodily conduct, by body, speech and mind, who did not revile the noble ones, who held right view, who undertook karma based on right view, with the breakup of the body after death, have been reborn in a good destination, in a heavenly world. Thus, with a divine eye which is purified and surpasses the human, he sees beings passing away and being reborn, inferior and superior, beautiful and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate, and he understands how beings fare in accordance with their karma. So, this is about understanding the law of karma. This is the mechanism that drives rebirth, right? So this gives you a sense of how this whole thing actually works, how it functions. And very often you will hear this idea that rebirth has to happen because there is a soul that kind of, goes through this whole process, and that is how rebirth happens. Or you will hear the idea that we are, you get reborn through many births, but you're always moving in a certain direction towards some higher goal or something. But the law of karma shows basically this is not the case. The rebirth happens only in accordance with karma. So there's no direction to this. It goes up and down, just depending on how you live your life. So again, you have this, it is based on the fourth jhana attainment. You come out of the jhana and then you can recall your past lives. You can direct it to the knowledge of the passing away and rebirth of beings, the idea of karma. So with the divine eye, which is purified and surpasses the human, this is the Dibba Chakku, and Dibba Chakku quite literally means the heavenly eye, and it surpasses purified in the sense that there are no defilements in the mind, so you're seeing things as they actually are, right? It often says in the suttas that the Buddha's faculties are purified, and they're purified in that sense of seeing things directly, immediately as they are. So that it's purified in that sense, and it surpasses the human. You can imagine what this might be like. It's a bit like, for example, when somebody dies, you hear about these near-death experiences, right? And the strange thing is that when you leave your body, people experience that they can still sense things. You can still hear, you can still see, you can still do all these things, even though the physical body as we normally have it is actually left behind. And this is like this divine eye, right? It's something which is independent of the physical body. It is an eye that is connected more with the mind than with the physical body. Now in Buddhism we don't actually make such an absolute distinction between mind and body. The distinction is much more subtle. So even when you die, you still have a body. It's just a more subtle form of the physical body. So there isn't this kind of idea of dualism that you have in Western philosophy, that you have the mind on one side and the body on the other side. It isn't quite like that. It's much more complicated relationship between mind and body. So because of that, this subtle body that you have is also able to see. And this is the divine eye, that, as it is called in the suttas, the Dibba Chakku, or the heavenly eye. And it is this eye that then you use and you're able to see beings passing away and being reborn, inferior and superior. This usually refers to the karmic quality of the person, right? Somebody who is a good person is a superior one. The inferior one is like, considered a bad person. This is a standard way of looking at people in the suttas as inferior and superior. And it's all based on morality, right? That's what makes you superior or inferior. Beautiful and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate. Usually fortunate and unfortunate, I'm not sure if it is the best possible translation. This, I think, is sugati and dugati, and it basically means someone who is heading to a good destination and someone who's heading to a bad destination. Of course, fortunate can be implied, but fortune is more like chance, right? In English, it's a bit of chance involved in that. There's nothing much to do with chance here. It has everything to do with karma and how you lived your life. And he understands, because of that, how beings fare on in accordance with the karma. He sees that bad actions bring the people to a bad destination, and good actions lead people to a good destination. And those actions here are specifically, as we have been seeing throughout the past few days, bad conduct, body, speech, and mind. And also here the reviling of the noble ones. If you are somebody who sees a very pure person, like an arahant or a Buddha or something like that, and perhaps because of jealousy or anger or some stupid thing, you revile somebody who is very pure and a very beautiful person. Of course, that is going to be very bad karma, right? It should be, if you have your eyes open, you will see that this is a pure person. You should be careful what you do, otherwise you're going to create bad karma for yourself. And then you also hold wrong view, and then based on that wrong view, of course, you act in accordance with that. So you see all this, you see how the connection between action and rebirth happens, how this all connects up. And then you have the opposite of the good person, who does the exact opposite. So this is what you then see with the divine eye. And as I was saying this morning, remember that this is not the process that you are really in charge of. People sometimes think that the good thing about karma is that all I have to do is make lots of good karma and then I will be all right. Which is true right now, because right now you may be feeling like making good karma, but how long will that feeling last? How secure is that feeling? Feeling changes. We tend to think that the feeling I have now is the feeling I will have in the future. This is that a delusion of permanence, right? We tend to think that who we are now will somehow continue. Finally I found happiness. You feel happy one day, and then the next day you feel miserable again. What happened to the happiness? I thought I had it. And we always live under this delusion of permanence somehow. So we think that our intentions now will continue, but they won't. That's the problem. And in the future you will get, as I said before, under the wrong influence with the wrong people. You won't have a good teaching to guide you in the right direction, and then you will start doing all the wrong things. So the law of karma is much more frightening in a way than it seems at first, because you don't really control this thing here. It just happens, rolls on by itself. It's an impersonal process, and it just happens. So that's what you see. And then when you see that, I'm reading from this one now, then this is the second true knowledge attained by him. Ignorance is dispelled, true knowledge has arisen, darkness is dispelled, light has arisen, as happens when one dwells heedful, ardent and resolute. And this is also the second breaking out of the shell. The poor chicken has to break out of all these shells. That's pretty first one, then another one. So this is the second breaking out. And then you see even more of the world. You understand even more how difficult the situation you are in. And these two things are then the foundation stone. You have understood rebirth, you have understood the mechanism behind rebirth, and this is the foundation stone for which now you can leave the world behind. So if you remember the sequence we had before, we're talking about the sequence of meditation, how it happens. with the idea of no volition, how the sequence goes. So this is all part of Yatha Bhuta Anadasana, right? The seeing of things as they actually are. This is part of that. And if you remember, from that comes this thing called nibbida, the sense of aversion, or I think disenchantment is too weak, the sense of being repelled by the world. You can't take it anymore because you see the enormity of the suffering. So you get repelled by all of that. And that is when you are ready to attain Nibbana, because that's when you're ready to give up craving for all of that. And attaining Nibbana is giving up the craving for all these things. So that's where we are. But let me, before I go on to that, let me go back to the simile again and have a look at the simile for karma as well, for seeing the laws of karma. See if I can find that in here. It's a very simple simile. Okay, and it goes just simply as this. Just as though there were two houses with doors, and a man with good eyesight standing there between them saw people entering the houses and coming out, and passing to and fro. So too, with the divine eye, which is purified, you see beings coming back and forth from life to life. So it's just like people moving back and forth between two houses, and you see how they're going back and forth like that. A very, very simple simile to explain a process which can appear quite complicated. Okay, so now we are ready to make the great breakthrough. So let us see how that breakthrough then works. So this is the last of the three great knowledges, the Te Vijja in the Pali, and it goes as follows. When his mind has been thus concentrated, purified, cleansed, unblemished, rid of defilements, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, he directs it to the knowledge of the destruction of the taints, of the corruptions, if you like, of the defilements. He understands as it really is. This is suffering. He understands as it really is. This is the origin of suffering. He understands as it really is. This is the cessation of suffering. He understands as it really is. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering, the Four Noble Truths. He understands as it really is. These are the taints. Is that in here? Yeah, is that in here? Yes, it is. Okay, good. Yeah. He understands as it really is. This is the origin of the taints. He understands as it really is. This is the cessation of the taints. He understands as it really is. This is the way leading to the cessation of these corruptions and defilements. When he knows and sees thus, his mind is liberated. No, I think I should go back here again now. Sorry about this. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. This too, Brahmin. We should be back on Majjhima 27. I get a bit confused. I got too many different suttas going at the same time here. This too, Brahmin, is called a footprint of the Tathagata, something scraped by the Tathagata, something marked by the Tathagata. But the noble disciple still has not yet come to the conclusion. The Blessed One is fully awakened. The Dhamma is well proclaimed by the Blessed One. The Sangha is practicing the good way. Rather, he is in the process of coming to this conclusion. So now the disciple has seen the Four Noble Truths, which basically means that he at the very least become a stream enterer at this point. And he is, at that point, you have the Avecha Pasada. Avecha Pasada means unshakable confidence. And I am not sure about the translation here and the reading and understanding of the sutta. I think, I'm not sure if this is the way it is to be understood. But anyway, let's leave that aside, because there is it's a bit of a problem of interpretation here. It's probably close enough anyway here. So you have seen the Four Noble Truths. You've got unshakable confidence in the Buddha because you know the path, you know everything. And this is what is happening at this particular stage. Seeing the Four Noble Truths, the suffering, the origin, seeing the taints again. This is just an alternative way of looking at the Four Noble Truths. It's looking at the Four Noble Truths from the viewpoint of the defilements, right? You understand purification. You understand what stops the mind from being purified. And you understand the ending of this purification, these defilements. It's a similar idea as the Four Noble Truths. So you see that, and then comes the very final part of this sutta. When he knows and sees thus, his mind is liberated from the corruption of sensual desire. His mind is liberated from the corruption of being or existence. His mind is liberated from the corruption of ignorance. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge. It is liberated. He understands birth is destroyed. The holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being. This true Brahmin is called a footprint of the Tathagata, something scraped by the Tathagata, something marked by the Tathagata. It is at this point that a noble disciple has come to the full conclusion. The Blessed One is fully awakened, the Dhamma is well proclaimed by the Blessed One, the Sangha is practicing the good way here. And it is at this point, Brahmin, that the simile of the elephant's footprint has been completed in detail. So, at this point, you know, you have seen the elephant, so to speak, for yourself. You have seen the Buddha, you have seen the Dhamma, you have destroyed the defilements, right? And the elephant is right there. You can see him. And it's only then that you have knowledge. It's direct, experiential, if you like. You can call it empirical knowledge, because you have the experience for yourself. And this is the way the Dhamma works. It works basically on the idea of empiricism in many ways. So you see here, the mind is liberated from the corruption of sensual desire. No more sensual desire, completely destroyed, nothing more of that. And already you have, of course, abandoned it already in the jhanas, but now the root defilement, the anusaya, as somebody was saying here the other day, the underlying defilements has gone forever and can never arise again. The taint of being here, the taint of existence, this actually refers to the desire for existence. So it's actually the corruption of desire for existence. You don't want to be reborn again. You have no desire for rebirth. When somebody says that your life is going to come to an end, you say, hooray, no more of this. Finally, off the wheel of samsara. Don't want to be reborn again. So that taint is a corruption of the mind to want to exist. That has been destroyed. If somebody comes and says, I want to take your life, you say, all right, well, whatever. If you want to make some bad karma, I wouldn't recommend it, but, it's almost like that, right? Because you don't really care about your own life anymore. You will still go on out of compassion for others because you are a great merit for people in the world. You can teach the Dhamma because you've seen it for yourself, but you don't have any attachment even to be alive anymore. So that is kind of the power of this. So, no more corruption of existence, no more corruption of ignorance. You have full insight into reality here. That has also been completely destroyed. And that basically just means seeing the Four Noble Truths, right? And everything that entails, such as dependent origination and all of these things. And then, once you have reached this liberation, as I said the other day, it is not just that you are liberated, but you know that you are liberated. That you actually are aware of that when it happens. And what you understand when you are liberated, and this is, I think, quite interesting. What does the awakened person understand? Sometimes people think when you're arahant, you understand all these various things, about the world and all that, which of course is true to some extent. But the understanding that matters is this understanding here. Birth is destroyed. The holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being. That is the real understanding that matters for the arahant. Everything else is secondary here. And what that understanding means is that you have ended dukkha, right? Because dukkha is precisely being on the wheel of samsara, going round and round. So that is the knowledge that the arahant has. And it's always the same thing, sometimes phrased in slightly different terms, but that is what it means to be fully awakened according to the Buddha's teachings. Doesn't mean anything else, it just means that. And then, only then, do you then come to the conclusion that the Tathagata is fully awakened, fully enlightened. So there you are. That is what you are. We're all kind of sort of aiming for, perhaps. I don't know if you are aiming for it, but that is kind of the purpose of the Noble Eightfold Path. It's difficult, it's profound, it's hard to understand, but I think it's good to have it in the back of your mind so you know basically what this Dhamma really is about in its higher purpose. But regardless, even if you find it difficult to perhaps relate to these kind of things, the point, of course, with the Dhamma is that it's all about happiness, even if it is just more ordinary happiness or a little bit more profound or quite profound or very profound. It's all about that, and it's all heading in the right direction regardless. So you can't really go wrong with the teachings of the Dhamma. So, now we have seen that elephant. We have come to the final end point of this long journey of gradual training. And then, of course, we have the rejoicing at the end. And this is a kind of standard passage of rejoicing you have at the very end. When this was said, the Brahmin Janusoni said to the Blessed One, actually, before I do that, I should do something else first, because this one also has a simile to it. The destruction of the taints also has a simile. And I like to look at these similes, because they often give a different dimension to what is going on. So let's have a look at the simile one more time. Okay, so this is the simile you find in the suttas for the destruction of the taints. Just as if there were a lake in a mountain recess, clear, limpid, and undisturbed, so that a man with good sight standing on the bank could see shells, gravel, and pebbles, and also shoals of fish swimming about and resting. He might think, there is this lake, clear, limpid, and undisturbed, and there are these shells, gravel, and pebbles, and also these shoals of fish swimming about and resting. So too, a bhikkhu understands as it actually is the Four Noble Truths, etc. So this gives you, it's a nice simile, it gives an idea of what is happening here. So what is happening here, the mind is like the lake, right? The mind has become absolutely clear because of the power of the mind. This is one of the reasons why we practice these jhanas and we go as high as possible, because the mind becomes more and more powerful as you go up. And the more power you have, the more clearly you can see into that mind. So that's why the lake is clear, right? And you look inside, you can see everything inside the lake. Just as when you look into your mind, you can see everything that is going on in your mind. You see the pebbles, the etc., etc. Whatever is there, you can see it. And in particular, I like this idea here about the shoals of fish swimming about and resting. Swimming about and resting is like your mind moving, right? The mind moving or the mind becoming still. And you can see the movement of the mind. You can see the fish. And you can see the movement of the mind, how all the factors of the mind arise and change and pass away all the time. In particular, you can see consciousness. You can see how consciousness of the different kinds arise. You see the eye consciousness, and then you see mind consciousness, ear consciousness perhaps, mind consciousness, and you see how consciousness is always changing. And this is particularly the insight which is sometimes very important. When you see consciousness changing like that, you can also, this is another way of seeing the profundity of non-self, right? Consciousness is going from one type to another type, and then back again and back and forth. And there is no real overlap or continuity between the different types of consciousness. They are like individual moments, like water molecules in a river, one molecule coming after the other, but never being the same molecule one moment after the other. So this is what you see. You see the mind. You see clearly what is happening in there. So this is this simile here. Sometimes people ask about this idea. We have this idea in Buddhism about the stream of consciousness, right? Going from one life to another one, being established in this life, moving on from another life. And sometimes people don't understand what's the difference between the stream of consciousness and the idea of a self or an idea of something permanent inside. And the difference is that a stream of consciousness is like if you are watching a river at a particular point, right? Now, is there two consecutive moments when you have the same water molecule in that river? It's always moving forward. And this is like consciousness, always changing from one form to another one. But the overall shape of the river is roughly the same. The overall shape only changes slowly over the seasons, depending on the rainfall, depending on the heat and all these other kind of factors. So the shape changes slowly, but moment to moment, the consciousness changes very rapidly. And that's exactly how the stream of consciousness works. There is a continuous changing in the mind, but the overall shape of the mind, our habits, our ways of doing things tend to linger, right? They tend to stay there over time, over period, and change only very slowly, just like the river changes slowly. Just as a little side issue there. But this is then the simile on how the destruction of the asavas comes about. You see into the mind, you see everything very clearly. And then we come to the final verse here, final paragraph I should say. When this was said, the Brahmin Janusoni said to the Blessed One, "Magnificent Master Gotama, magnificent Master Gotama. Master Gotama has made the Dhamma clear in many ways, as though he were turning upright what had been overthrown, revealing what was hidden, showing the way to one who was lost, and holding up a lamp in the dark for those with eyesight to see forms. I go to Master Gotama for refuge, and to the Dhamma and to the Sangha of bhikkhus. From today, let Master Gotama remember me as a lay follower who has gone to him for refuge for life." So here you can see again this idea that the Dhamma tends to revolutionize our view of reality. We look at things in a different way, particularly when you have the deep insights. It's like somebody turning things, right way up, holding up a lamp in the dark. Sometimes the Buddha, I think I mentioned this before, is called the eye of the world in the suttas, because the Buddha has seen, and then he passes on that information to everyone else. So, there we are, the breaking out of the third shell, the seeing of the final light, and now you have seen it all, and you have made an end of absolutely everything. End of sutta. So, okay, so we have a few minutes left, and I thought maybe it would be nice to recap a little bit on what we have been talking about over these last week or so. There's been an enormous amount of information for you, and hopefully you have been able to take on board some of that information and enjoy it, and may hopefully also to make use of it in your daily life and in your meditation practice and all these kind of things. But maybe just to summarize some of the main points and some of the things that I find particularly important in this whole practice of Buddhism. And the first thing which we started off the retreat with was the soil remover simile, right? That basically the path that we are following is a path of purification. So remember that. And the point is that if you keep purifying yourself, then the meditation will always improve. Purification and success in meditation go together. It's not about how you apply yourself so much. It's not about watching the breath, is just watching the breath, really. There isn't much to it. But it is the purity of mind that makes it possible to watch the breath in a peaceful way, without getting distracted, without thinking, without getting restless and tired and all these kind of things. So purification is really the key. And that purification in the gradual training always begins with the purification of body and purification of speech. And this is something that never ends. You never come to the end of this. This is something you can just keep on practicing and practicing and practicing, becoming more and more pure in these things. So don't think that you are now so advanced that you don't have to worry anymore about the purity of speech and body. You always have to worry about that. And the more powerful you make the very first, the beginning of the path, the more powerful become the later aspects of the path, right? So the more more effort, the more ability, the more clear comprehension, the more yoniso manasikara you can put into just being kind, being a good person, the more powerful everything else becomes. And please remember that the idea of purification or virtue or a body in Buddhism is not just about not doing the bad things, it's also about doing the good things. Being kind, being compassionate, being good, going out into the world and seeing if you can be helpful to the people and the world around you. Remembering the suffering in the world, remembering the problems out there. And once you remember the suffering, once you understand the world in the right way, there will be a natural compassion inside of you, and you will want to help out. You will want to do something in the world. And if you have, there was one lady the other day, she told me that she was like between jobs and she didn't have much to do. What a wonderful opportunity that is then to apply yourself to some charity work or service work for other people, as well as looking after yourself in your own meditation practice, etc. So this is where the foundation stones are laid. So don't ignore this. This is such an important part of the Buddhist path. This is so fundamental. And of course generosity also comes in here, right? The opposite of stealing, and all these factors come together. And then once you have laid that foundation by body and speech, then you have to look at your mind. And the next thing is to learn to purify your own mind. And I spent an enormous amount of time, I think almost 2 full days possibly, just talking about the purification of the mental processes. So this is the next thing to do, to apply yourself to purifying your mind, learning to look at the world in a new way. If you get angry, how can I look at people in a way whereby anger doesn't arise? How can I learn to see the good side in this person which irritates me? How can I learn to understand that people are conditioned, that do things because of conditions, not because they want to be bad? And as you learn to change your perceptions, learn to look at the world in a new way, you will see that these defilements start to decline. And it is particularly anger and also harming, the negative, this very negative force in us. This is the one that is most important to reduce in daily in our lives, particularly for lay people. For monastics, it's also important to focus, of course, on the sensual aspect, because monastic life, when you live a celibate life, you have to be more careful with that aspect of things. So you also need to see the danger in sensuality. Lay people can also do that, but it's certainly important for monastics. And that also helps the mind to become peaceful, right? If you can see the danger in sensuality, how it binds you to samsara, how actually there isn't that much happiness there, how it always involves craving, the agitation, the restlessness of the mind, it isn't really peaceful. The true spiritual happiness is much more powerful. All of these things turn you away from sensuality and turn you towards peace and a much more beautiful and profound happiness. The happiness of the heart, of a beautiful heart, which is kind, compassionate, and understanding instead. So this is about purifying the mind. And this is a very important part of the process. If you want to have true success in meditation, this is really the only way. The mind has to be pure. And of course, a pure mind has many other wonderful characteristics. You feel happy when the mind is pure. This is part of it. Not only do you feel happy, but when the mind is pure, your virtue in body and speech becomes pretty much automatic. If the mind is bright, if you have kindness inside, that always comes out in your speech and your actions, right? You don't have to strive so hard anymore. The whole path becomes automatic. As it says in the suttas, for the good person, it's easy to be good. For the bad person, it's easy to be bad, but difficult to be good. For the good person, it's actually hard to be bad, because your mind is always inclining towards goodness. What a wonderful thing that is, when you're always inclining towards goodness, when this is your kind of default state, to be kind and to be good to others. So this is what you're trying to do here. Shift your mind, shift your habits, shift your tendency and everything towards goodness instead. And then you find that the meditation starts to take off. And the purer you are, the more you can just sit back and allow things to be. And there's nothing you have to do because the meditation happens all by itself. That is the best kind of meditation. When there's nothing you do, all you do is just rest. Allow things to settle down, and it just becomes deeper by itself. And because you have done so much good in the past, when the mind becomes peaceful, that goodness comes back to you. Remember the simile of the mountain. When you have done a mountain of good actions, it's like sitting in the shade of that mountain of good actions. And they overwhelm you, they envelop you, they surround you on all sides. And you cannot but feel glad. You cannot but feel happy because of all that goodness. So especially when the mind calms down and you get stillness inside, that all comes back to you. And then the process of meditation happens all by itself. You just rest, you just wait, you just are patient, you don't do anything here. And it happens as a natural process. What a wonderful thing that is when that works. And of course, it is especially on retreats like this, or whatever retreat you go to, when you are by yourself, when you have time, that is when these things happen. So that is the deep kinds of meditation. That does not mean that all other meditation is a waste of time. I just want to talk a little bit for the very last few minutes about how to meditate in daily life. Because this kind of meditation, when the process happens by itself and it unfolds in a beautiful way, usually that will happen on retreat. And it's not so easy to make that happen in ordinary lay life in particular. If you are, it can happen to some people, but to most people it will not happen. So how then should we use meditation in daily life? Now please remember, the most important thing is again the purity, right? That is what really matters. The most important thing is to be able to be kind. So if you are constantly able to be kind in daily life, if you don't allow yourself to be dragged in by the things happening around you, generally speaking, sometimes of course it happens, but generally speaking, then that is what you want to try to aim for. So then even if you don't do any meditation, it doesn't matter so much because you're able to keep the purity inside of you. So if you're able to keep that purity, then that is what is really important. But if you find it difficult to retain purity in the hustle and bustle of daily life, when everything is happening so fast and people say things and then you get upset because they said the wrong thing and all these kind of things, then use meditation simply to balance yourself, to keep a sense of perspective where you can withdraw into yourself, close your eyes and withdraw from the world, and then balance yourself out again. So use it as a tool to help you develop the virtue, the kindness, the purity of character. So every day when you come back home in the evening, or perhaps when you wake up in the morning, depending on your character, spend a little bit of time just to balance yourself, just to relax, right? Some people told me that they sometimes feel stressed because they have a very kind of high performance job that demands a lot of them. And for people like that, it's important that you take the time to just chill out, right? And relax. Because when you do that, when you are at ease, when you're relaxed, it's easy to be kind. When you are tense and stressed, it is hard to be kind. So use meditation just to calm down and feel at ease. Number one. Number two, do a little bit of metta meditation if you can. It doesn't mean that you have to give rise every day to all these marvelous positive feelings towards the whole world. That is quite difficult to do. But just train yourself to look at people in a new way. Train yourself to look at people with compassion and kindness. Train yourself to understand people in the world. And just by directing your mind and trying to say to other beings, may you be happy, and allowing it to come from your heart, really think of people out there. They deserve to be happy. There's so many good people out there. May they truly find that happiness. And when you say that from your heart, and when you learn to look at people in a new way, that is enough to help you move your mind and move the perception in a new direction. Even if you don't feel all that much, at least in the beginning, that is not the main purpose perhaps of the exercise, but it's to learn you to refocus. So a few minutes of metta every day is a great thing to do. So these are just some suggestions for you, and every one of you will have to deal with these things as it works best in your life. And remember that wonderful advice that the Buddha gave, which I talk about it all the time because I think it's such a good advice. Whatever you do in life that gives rise, that helps you to increase the wholesome qualities inside of you, whatever that is, whether it has to do with your job, your relationships, how you practice the Dhamma, if it leads to growth in good states and decline in bad states, then you are on the right track. So monitor yourself, look inside of yourself, is it going the right way? Don't judge over too short a span of time, look over the months, even the years perhaps, and then you will see. If, on the other hand, the bad states are increasing and the good states are declining, then think to yourself, what am I doing wrong? Have I got my priorities wrong? What is really important in my life? What should I change? What really matters? Is it important, how much wealth I accumulate in this life? Or is it more important to develop my mind? What is the long-term benefit? And the long-term benefit, of course, in particular, if you have the idea of rebirth in mind, then the long-term benefit is always to develop your mind and your heart. And the wealth in this world, it's fine to be wealthy, it doesn't matter, there's nothing wrong with being wealthy, but that is not necessarily a priority that one needs to emphasize too much if one has the right view of Dhamma, right? So this is just to give you some sense of direction in life, some sense of going the right way. And then you will find that when you go on retreat from year to year, many people do one retreat a year at least, some people might do more, but let's say you do one retreat a year, then you will find that every time you go on retreat, something has changed, something has improved, right? So you look inside your mind, has it improved? And if it has improved, then you know that you're living your life in the right way. If it hasn't improved, if there is no change inside of you, your meditation isn't improving, then ask yourself why. Is there something else I can do in my life to change, to help improve the meditation process? You should see this movement towards deeper meditation happening all the time. And this is how I live my life. I always ask myself, am I going in the right direction? And the reason I'm still a monk after 17 years, I've been living in monasteries for 20 years now, is because I have seen the gradual progress going in the right direction all the time. If I hadn't seen that, I probably would have disrobed a long time ago. Because what's the purpose in living in a monastery and depriving yourself of the ordinary happinesses of life if you don't actually gain some of the spiritual happiness of the spiritual path? At the very least, you should see that you are moving in the right direction. That is kind of the very least. And then you sustain the progress. You feel happy, you feel content, you feel it's going somewhere, there's a purpose, the spiritual life is working, and it all comes together in a very nice way. Okay, so that is all I want to say. So I think we will see each other again this evening, right? There's one more Q&A this evening, yeah? So let us just pay respect to the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha.